Okay, let's unpack this. Think about learning a new language for a second.
Mhm.
You learn words, you learn sounds, but actually, tying it all together so you can use it.
Right, to actually communicate.
That often comes down to grammar.
Hmm.
And for so many of us, nailing down the grammar, especially something like, say, the past tense,
Oh, yeah.
knowing when to say walked versus went,
Hmm.
or how to ask about something that already happened,
Hmm.
it can feel like a real hurdle.
It absolutely is. The past tense in English, it's kind of notorious, isn't it?
Yeah.
Regular forms,
Yeah.
irregular forms,
Yeah.
you need to master rules, and a whole load of exceptions.
Exactly. And that challenge, that's actually the starting point for the research we're diving into today.
Right.
We're looking at just one specific paper.
Hmm.
And it focuses entirely on teaching that very thing, the past tense in English, but for like a really specific group,
Hmm.
young learners, fifth graders, actually.
So our source material for this deep dive, it's a research paper called Teaching Past Tense by Using Repetition and Substitution Drill to Fifth Grade Students.
Yeah.
It's by Samara Chand and Robia Tabassum, and it was published in the Journal of Contemporary Teacher Education back in 2022.
Got it. So our mission here is to really get into this one study. We want to understand what it looked at, these specific teaching methods, repetition drills, and substitution drills for teaching the past tense. What did this research find? And maybe what could that suggest about teaching those like foundational grammar bits?
And just to be clear, we're sticking strictly to what's in this paper, its world, its findings.
Exactly. No going off script.
So the paper kind of sets the stage first. It reminds us that fundamentally, language is for interaction.
Right. Talking to people.
That's its primary purpose, how individuals connect and communicate effectively.
Yeah. It's not just knowing facts about a language. It's using it live.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And the source really emphasizes that grammar is like the central piece in that.
The engine room.
Sort of. It's the critical link between sounds and meaning. It lets us structure words, phrases, make understandable messages so that interaction can actually happen.
Okay, so grammar isn't just some dusty list of rules.
Yeah.
It's the framework, the glue, maybe,
Uh-huh.
that makes communication work. Makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the study really zooms in on these things called drill methods, drilling. Sometimes it gets a bit of a bad rap, right? Like it's old-fashioned.
It can, yeah.
So what does this paper actually mean by drilling?
Well, the paper defines it pretty simply. It's basically repeating what you hear from a model.
A model, like the teacher.
Could be the teacher, yeah, or a recording, maybe even another student. The main idea is structured, guided repetition,
Mm-hmm.
or manipulating language patterns.
Okay, structured repetition.
Yeah.
And they looked at two specific kinds in this study, repetition and substitution.
That's right. Repetition drill, that's the most basic one. The student
Uh-huh.
just repeats exactly what the teacher or the model says.
Uh-huh.
And the paper notes, it cites Doff and Lynch here, saying this is often used to quickly get students familiar with like particular structures or common phrases.
And it helps with pronunciation, too, presumably.
It can, yeah. It helps tune the ear and practice the sounds.
And I see they also bring in Larson Freeman, linking repetition to forming language habits
Mm-hmm.
and helping memory.
Right. The idea is it helps form habits, almost like how we might pick up parts of our first language. Through repeated exposure and use, it aids memorization.
That's interesting, framing it like natural habit formation, not just rote learning.
Yeah, it suggests what maybe a deeper cognitive reason for why simple repetition might actually work.
Okay, so that's repetition drill. How does substitution drill build on that? What's different?
Substitution drill, the paper describes it, citing Mahurdia, starts with a model sentence, just like before.
Okay.
But then the students have to change something. They substitute one or more keywords within that same structure.
Ah, okay, so maybe the teacher says they played yesterday.
Yeah.
And gives a cue like watched.
Exactly, and the student has to respond, they watched yesterday, using the same sentence pattern but swapping the verb.
I see. So repetition is pure mimicry, but substitution that makes you actively use the structure, apply a new word inside it.
Right, it starts pushing towards more active use of the language pattern.
It feels like a step up. And the paper mentions other drills can follow this, like question and answer.
Yeah, Larson Freeman again. Substitution can be a stepping stone towards, more complex drills or even more communicative practice later on.
Okay. But given that, teaching methods evolve, people often talk about moving away from drills, why did these researchers focus specifically on these techniques now?
Well, the paper points out that even with shifts in, let's say, educational philosophy, drilling is still something a lot of teachers use.
Right. Practical reality.
And traditional teaching methods are apparently common in some contexts, like the one they studied. So the researchers wanted to actually evaluate if these specific drill methods
Repetition and substitution.
could be an effective alternative, or maybe even an improvement compared to, say, less structured traditional ways of teaching the past tense to these elementary kids.
They wanted some hard evidence for techniques that are either still in use or perhaps easy to implement.
Pretty much, putting classic techniques to a focused test.
So let's talk about that test, the setting. Who were the students exactly? And how do they actually run the study?
Okay, so the study involved fifth-grade girls. They were students at government elementary schools in Pakistan, specifically in the Nowshera district.
Right.
And the sample size, the actual group they worked with, was 17 girls from one particular school.
Okay, so quite a small specific group in a particular educational system. And how do they measure the effect of these drills? What was the method?
They used an experimental approach. The paper calls it a single-group 4-cycle pre-test post-test design.
Whoa, okay. Sounds complicated. Can you break that down?
Yeah, let's simplify. Single group just means they worked with that same group of 17 girls throughout.
Okay, no separate control group.
Right. And 4-cycle means they had 4 distinct teaching periods or cycles over several weeks.
A pre-test, post-test.
That's the core of it. Before each teaching cycle started, they gave the students the pre-test, to see what they already knew about the past tense stuff.
Baseline.
Exactly. Then, after the teaching period for that cycle was done, they gave them another test, the post-test, to measure how much they learned during that cycle.
Ah, I see. So you compare the pre-test score to the post-test score for each cycle to see the impact of whatever teaching happened in that cycle.
Precisely. And presumably, some cycles used the drill methods. Others might have used different, maybe more traditional methods they were comparing against.
So the students effectively acted as their own comparison group over time. Smart. How long were these cycles?
Each cycle lasted 2 weeks, according to the paper.
Okay. And what specific past tense stuff were they teaching and testing in these cycles?
They covered both regular past tense verbs like walked and irregular ones like went.
The tricky ones.
Definitely. And they focused on using these verbs correctly in different kinds of sentences. So positive statements, she played, negative statements, she didn't play, and questions, did she play?
So using the grammar in context.
Right. And they also included tasks where students had to rearrange sentences, probably to check understanding of structure.
And the tests themselves. What were they like?
The paper mentions using multiple choice or similar item formats for the pre and post tests to collect the data.
Okay, so they were looking at different forms, different uses, not just one tiny piece of the past tense.
Seems quite comprehensive for the past tense.
Now, the study had 4 main goals, right? 4 objectives. 4 specific things they wanted to measure the effect of the drills on. What were they?
Yes, they laid out 4 key areas they investigated. They wanted to see the effect of using these repetition and substitution drills on.
Okay, number 1.
1, the student's ability to actually construct sentences using the past tense correctly, like getting the grammar right.
Okay, makes sense. Number 2.
2, the effect on the student's overall performance in past tense tasks. And here they particularly focused on the substitution drills.
Interesting. So general performance, maybe speed or accuracy.
The paper implies overall success in the tasks. 3, they wanted to see if the drills improved student vocabulary.
Vocabulary through grammar drills. Okay.
Yeah, that's an interesting angle. And 4, the effect on the student's retention level. Basically, how well they remembered the past tense stuff over time.
Right. Construction, performance, vocabulary, and retention, how well it sticks. Those really are crucial parts of learning, aren't they?
Absolutely. Foundational pillars, like you said.
So they ran these cycles, they crunched the numbers from the pre and post tests. What did Chan and Dabasum actually find? What did they conclude?
Well, the results, as they present them in the conclusions section, were actually quite clear-cut for this group. Pretty striking.
Okay, lay it on us. Finding one. About constructing sentences.
Okay, first, regarding the ability to construct the past tense correctly, the study concluded the drill method did have a significant effect.
Significant effect. So not just a small bump, but a measurable, statistically meaningful improvement.
Exactly. Their analysis showed a clear improvement in getting the past tense grammar right, and it was linked to using those drill methods.
Wow. So for these students, drills help them build grammatically correct sentences. That hits that grammar hurdle we mentioned right at the start.
Yes. For this specific group, a definite positive impact on that core skill.
Okay. What about the second objective? Overall performance, especially with substitution drills.
Second finding, they found that the substitution drill method specifically had a significant impact on the performance of the students.
Again, significant impact. So substitution drills really move the needle on how well these kids did on the tasks.
It seems so. Again, demonstrably improved performance linked to that specific drill type.
Huh. That is interesting that substitution gets singled out there.
Yeah.
Maybe because it's a bit more active, like we discussed.
That's plausible. It pushes them beyond just copying into actually applying the structure with a new word. Needs a bit more processing.
Makes sense. Okay, finding number 3 was vocabulary. Did drills help with words?
Yes. The study concluded that after the treatment, meaning after using both repetition and substitution drills, the students' vocabulary improved.
Seriously? I mean, I wouldn't immediately think of drills as the main way to build vocabulary. Grammar, sure, but words?
It's surprising, maybe, but the data suggested it. Perhaps practicing the structures with different words embedded in them help those words stick.
That implies a benefit beyond just the grammar form itself.
Interesting. Okay, and the fourth one, retention. Did it help them remember?
That was the fourth objective, yeah. And the study found that the repetition and substitution drill method had a significant effect on the retention level of the students.
Now that's big. Retention is always a challenge, right?
Definitely.
Remembering stuff for a test is one thing. Keeping it long-term, that's the goal. So this study found drills significantly help these students remember the past tense rules and the words.
That's what their data indicated for this group, a significant effect on retention. Wow. Okay, so let's synthesize that. Across the board, for these specific 5th grade girls in this particular study, using repetition and substitution drills showed clear, positive, significant effects on getting the past tense right, on doing well in tasks, on learning new words, and maybe most importantly, on remembering it all later, compared to the other methods used.
Yeah, the findings really point in one direction for the effectiveness of these methods in this context.
It really makes you think twice about dismissing drills, doesn't it? If they're perceived as rote or boring.
Yeah.
Oh, this research gives actual evidence they could be genuinely effective.
Especially for building and, crucially, retaining those fundamental language skills, at least in these young learners.
What's fascinating is seeing these sort of traditional techniques showing such measurable positive results in key areas.
It certainly provides food for thought.
So let's bring this back to you listening. Whether you're learning a language yourself, maybe you're teaching, or you're just interested in how learning works. If these specific drill methods worked so well for this group of 5th graders learning the past tense, what does that suggest about their potential value, maybe more broadly?
Well, if you've ever felt like grammar rules just won't stick or vocabulary keeps slipping away.
We've all been there.
Right. Or if you're looking for ways to make foundational stuff more permanent for learners, this study offers pretty strong evidence. Focused, structured practice like these drills, it can be a really powerful tool.
Especially for those core skills and for helping things stick in long-term memory.
Yeah, it suggests drills aren't just some historical artifact. They could be a valuable part of the teaching toolkit right now.
And the authors of the paper, Chan and DeBassam, they definitely thought so. They made several specific recommendations based directly on what they found.
They did, yes. Their recommendations flow right from those conclusions we just talked about.
Okay, what did they suggest?
First, they recommend that teachers should actually use drill methods for teaching English, specifically at the elementary level.
A direct call to action for teachers in the classroom.
Second, they suggest that governments or maybe education departments should arrange teacher training. They specifically mention refresher courses that include how to use the drill method effectively.
So build it into professional development for current teachers.
Then, getting more specific, remember how substitution drills showed a big impact on performance?
Yeah.
Well, they recommend that teachers should particularly adopt substitution drills at the elementary level.
Okay, highlighting that one maybe because of that active element we discussed.
Possibly. And fourth, because the study showed vocabulary improved.
Right, the surprising one.
They recommend using repetition and substitution drills specifically for building student vocabulary, not just for grammar practice.
So apply the technique to different parts of language learning. Smart.
And finally, maybe the most important one, given the retention finding.
Yes.
They recommend that repetition and substitution drills should be included in the curriculum for pre-service teacher training courses.
Ah, so teaching the teachers before they even start their careers,
Yeah.
instilling it from the beginning.
Exactly. Teach future teachers how to use these methods effectively right from the get-go, because the evidence suggests they work, especially for retention.
Wow. So the findings didn't just stay academic. They translated them into really concrete suggestions for classrooms, for teacher training, both in-service and pre-service.
Yeah, it really underscores their conclusion about the effectiveness of these structured practice techniques, at least based on their study.
It definitely raises questions about how we balance different teaching approaches today.
It does.
Okay, so just to quickly recap the core findings from this deep dive into the Chand and Tabassum paper. The study found that for their specific group of fifth-grade students, using repetition and substitution drills was effective. It significantly improved their ability to construct the past tense, boosted their overall performance, increased their vocabulary, and maybe most notably, really helped their retention of what they learned.
Yeah, the results make a pretty strong case in this context for the power of focused, structured practice, building those fundamental skills and helping learners actually keep the information.
So here's a final thought for you to mull over based on all this. Given that this research provides such clear evidence, significant benefits for core skills like grammar, vocabulary, and especially that long-term retention
Yeah.
through techniques like repetition and substitution drills,
Yeah.
should we maybe be reevaluating the role of structured practice methods in language learning more broadly? Perhaps even challenge some modern approaches that might have shied away from drills. What does this study, particularly its findings on retention and performance, make you think about the real value of disciplined, focused practice in learning anything, really?
Something to definitely ponder as you think about your own learning or maybe how you help others learn.
Thanks for diving deep into this specific piece of research with us today.